Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode titled Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah. What movie are we doing this week?
This week, we will be talking about Wonderland. And Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie contains depictions of and/or references to pornography, murder, drug abuse, sex, Christianity, tarot cards, the devil, crime, reckless driving, genitalia, racism, underage sex, prostitution, foul language, cancer, divorce, gaslighting, freebasing, cocaine, heroin, measuring of male genitalia, humiliation, law enforcement, drug dealers, partying, seedy places, death, murder, blood-spattered walls, destruction of television sets and other household items, Rashomon-like conflicting memories of events, motorcycles, and possible whitewashing of at least one member of the Aryan Brotherhood.
Is that all? Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
So some of the sources we used in this episode include The Devil and John Holmes by Mike Sager. This was an article for Rolling Stone that is kind of the definitive telling of this story. Wonderland Murders podcast on Wondery, Michael Connolly's series on MGM TV called The Wonderland Massacre, Malice in Wonderland by Tom Lang, the documentary Wad, which came out in 1999. And also, just as a blanket note, basically, if there's a podcast or an episode of television or anything about this story, I've probably listened to it or watched it at least once.
Sarah, can you please tell us a little bit about John Holmes and the movie Wonderland? And just so you know, folks, this is a Sarah episode.
Oh, is this ever a Sarah episode? Basically, so if you've seen all of Boogie Nights, you have a general sense of the John Holmes story and who John Holmes is, because Mike Sager's article was something that very much informed P.T. Anderson as he was doing the first draft of Boogie Nights. So there's that, but also I want to just add in here too that Marky Mark is quite lovable in Boogie Nights, even when he's being a dick. And John Holmes was really not a good guy, and certainly not at this point in his life. And he maybe started off as kind of affable, but he was kind of a man beyond redemption by the end. He was very, very, very abusive to the women in his life. He knowingly had unprotected sex when he was diagnosed with AIDS, which is, to me, unforgivable. He was a pederast. He did a bunch of really shitty things that we're going to talk about. He was kind of a bad dude. But before we get into all of that, John Holmes was born in 1944. He died in 1988. He was among our most famous and prolific adult film performers with at least 573 film credits. He was most well known for his character Johnny Wad, a private detective in the style of Philip Marlowe, except for porn. John Holmes would claim that he made more than 2,220 films, but John Holmes is an inveterate liar. He was also known for the exceptional size of his penis, which was reportedly 13 inches long. Holmes himself said it was, quote, bigger than a payphone, smaller than a Cadillac, unquote. When he first measured it and told his then wife Sharon about it, he said it was 10 inches. And also from the internet, they say, his penis was promoted as the longest, thickest, and hardest in the porn industry, although no documented measurement of Holmes's actual penis length, girth, or tumescence has ever been confirmed. Please kill me.
One of the things I tried to find information on was I asked do any crimes ever get solved in Johnny Wad films? And we got conflicting information on this from Claude and ChatGPT, which you can see on our Instagram.
Yes.
The results. ChatGPT had better results.
At the top of the pops for John Holmes, he was earning, they say, as much as $3,000 a day. But concurrent to this, he was falling deep into the throes of a cocaine and freebase addiction, which affected his ability to perform and cost him roughly $3,000 a day. So, and the effect was not on his acting kind of performing. A skill he never had, though in WAD, a high as balls, I'm quite certain P.T. Anderson makes the claim that John Holmes could be a real actor if he wanted to. And I'm like, guy, you need to take all the seats. This is the one time you are wrong. He was very clean living when he started off in the porn industry. He was kind of like a nicest dude, and drugs and success turned him into a monster. I have not watched his movies start to finish. I have seen clips. John Holmes is definitely not my thing.
No, I hate porn. I don't find it sexy. Anytime that I've been in a room and it's been on, I've felt like, can you please just finish? Ew, stop doing that.
This is damning this with the faintest of praise. One thing I do appreciate is that this was an era in which they brought in actual storytelling rather than just like, here's two people doing it, which had a lot to do with morals clauses in Hollywood and making something of like artistic value. There's a whole complicated bunch of loopholes that they were trying to operate in order to not be arrested all the time, even though the filmmakers and actors were arrested all the time. But that's not the story here. Is there an alternate universe in which P.T. Anderson casts John Holmes in There Will Be Blood?
I mean, what I'm wondering about is, has anyone ever crossed over from porn to like real movies?
Tracy Lords. I don't know that anyone has ever really successfully made the jump from one to the other. Tracy Lords is in a couple of John Waters movies. So let's talk about cocaine a little bit here and the role of cocaine in all of this. So as I mentioned, he had a freebase addiction. I have a relatively strong academic understanding of drugs because I was in the DARE generation. So freebase, to me, after reacquainting myself via private search with what this was, because I was trying to understand what the difference was between freebase and crack. So it's slightly different because you use ammonia to extract the base of cocaine, which results in a very, very high level of purity from like the remaining product. This seems like a really super abject addiction. You light up a glass pipe in which the freebase rock sits and you smoke it. It is in your system immediately. The high is very intense, but it is very short-lived. And the crash apparently sucks, so you have to keep doing it. John needed to freebase every 10 to 15 minutes and took 40 to 50 Valium a day to manage the edge. Freebasing is also exceptionally dangerous in that the pipe can explode because that shit is flammable. And you also can really easily burn your hands and fingers and limbs using the pipe because you're heating it up. When Richard Pryor set himself on fire, he was freebasing.
And he got a great routine out of it.
He did. Mike Sager, the author of the Rolling Stone article, wrote that people have come to him for the rights to the story, which he isn't able to sell because he doesn't own it, including one mindhole blower, which was that Eric Roberts wanted to direct a film version of the John Holmes article and done it in homage to Bob Fosse. And that started me thinking about what Bob Fosse would have done with this story. And yeah, there's no Wonderland, and there's also no Boogie Nights without Star 80. I want to see that. I also now really want to see Phantom Thread starring multiple Academy Award winner under the auspices of direction from P.T. Anderson, John Holmes. So getting to Wonderland, the 2003 movie, was directed and co-written by James Cox, who's kind of a journeyman. He's made several movies, most recently Billionaire Boys Club with Kevin Spacey, and Hansel Elgort, but also Taron Egerton. And he's also a writer and a cinematographer. And I think you see both of those things really popping in this movie. I don't know why he's not in prestige television, because this, to me, looking from the prestige television lens, is like, would have been a perfect series. It premiered at Sundance and the Toronto Film Festival, but it really didn't perform well at the box office. It made $2.5 million against a $5 million budget. I really like this movie. First, I would like to comment the writers, and that's James Cox, Captain Mausner, Todd Samovitz, and D. Lauriston Scott went really deep and really hard. And I did that researching this. They went and they pulled dialogue from court transcripts in order to create these characters and their conversations. They did a lot of research and talked to a lot of the remaining people who were still alive. I was really taken with the cinematography and editing of this film. The DP is a man named Michael Grady, who was really early in his career when he was DPing this, and he would go on to do director of photography on Easy A, William Friedkin's Bug, future episode Factory Girl, and a bunch of other things. He has graduated into being a cinematographer, which is essentially the DP's boss, doing the Kane Mutiny Court-Martial with William Friedkin, and some episodes of my co-sweetheart's show, Your Honor. The editor, Jeff McAvoy, who edited the batshit crazy Megan and Megan 2.0, this was his second feature-length film that he edited, and this movie looks so good. I think this movie has a real polish to it that's pretty shocking, given how new all of these people were, relatively speaking, to feature-length films. This movie really skips the freewheeling fun times of being an actor in pornography and goes right to the record screech moment of then the music stopped.
Who says that right away? This is what happened when the party ended.
We start at the end of Act 2, and I will talk about the details that come up that illustrate where John Holmes was, because this movie is, to my understanding of the case, extraordinarily accurate, particularly the way it shows how people experience the various events.
I liked that it honed in on one story. Wonderland moves fast. It clocks in at an hour 44, including credits, but it felt more like an hour.
Yeah, it really moves. Critics did not care for this movie, and I think that's unfair, and I don't know why that is. A case of me having like bad taste, or this movie being a little ahead of its time, and I think it's the latter, although I do, separate and apart from me explaining this at this moment, have terrible taste. It feels like this could have been a stretched out series, and I'll get into it when we talk about this at the end of the episode, but like there's a lot of red thread to pull on. I really like the structure of this movie. I think the performances are all really strong. I am obsessed with this story, and as a scholar of Wonderland murders, I found this movie to be really, really true to the matter at hand. And I also thought the movie honored the truth in a way that kept the victims very central. Tim Blake Nelson, my boy, and Josh Lucas and Dylan McDermott play really bad dudes who sucked. And I still felt their humanity in this, despite all of that. Mm-hmm. Even though they were monsters, I understood motivations, and we saw them as three-dimensional people. Dawn Schiller and Sharon Holmes, who are the two women in John Holmes's lives, and are played by Kate Bosworth and
Lisa Kudrow. Lisa Kudrow is so good in this, and this is right around post Friends, I think.
Yeah.
And she does a great job playing a normal, decent human being who somehow got wrapped up in all of this.
She's so good in this movie. I think that their victimhood and the way that they manage what has transpired in their lives is kept very central in this. And it's also worth noting that Sharon Holmes and Dawn Schiller were involved in the production of this film. Dawn was an associate producer of this movie.
What does that mean, associate producer?
She was on set and she was contributing to the content. I don't think that Dawn Schiller gave them money.
No.
But I think that she was contributing to the truthfulness of the content. Like, there's a couple of choices that don't land for me personally, primarily the use of the actual morgue photos of the victims in the end sequence it's done for like single shot, like single cell, like Pazuzu inserts from The Exorcist. But I get why they did it. I just found for a movie that is very authentic, it was the tiniest bit of excess of authenticity. Ultimately, though, that's a Sarah problem and that's not a Wonderland problem. That's a choice they made that I didn't love just because I was like, this is bad enough. Seeing the way that they were murdered was bad enough for me. So some other things. I was just asking a lot of questions to myself about my life choices as we prepared for this because I realized how much I just knew off the top about this topic, like that I know who Tom Lang is, the detective.
Yes, I remember you texted me, I am a disgusting human being, and I texted you back that you are not. But you went through some self-loathing about your level of knowledge on the Wonderland murders.
Why do I know so much about this? I mean, I think like I am really interested in like the dark side of the film industry. And I also am really interested in California crime. The crime that happens in California is so interesting to me. I had seen Boogie Nights, but I didn't really know much about this part of the John Holmes story. And I think I've talked on the show before about how I had the lamest summer vacations imaginable when my friends would go off and like go to Europe and like whatever. And I have to go home and work. And I would watch a lot of cable television. E! True Hollywood Story was relatively new and they did an episode on this. And I feel like it aired maybe once or only aired in my mind because I've never heard of anybody else seeing it. I was shocked that I had never heard of the specifics of this crime. And, you know, obviously, because I was cool, I knew all about Charles Manson, but I didn't know about this case.
So, my first experience with Dirk Diggler and through John Holmes was one that I suspect many young ladies of our subgeneration had, which was this. I had heard about this rather notorious thing that you see at the end of the movie Boogie Nights, and I had never seen one because I was a big nerd who graduated high school having only had a few kisses in the woods and under the stairwell, and had bitterly spent junior prom night reading Jane Eyre and senior prom night reading Claudius the God, the sequel to I, Claudius. It was the summer between high school and college. Boogie Nights had long since finished in theater and had been released on videotape, and I was the owner of a driver's license stating that I was not merely over 17, but over 18 as well.
So you can rent R-rated movies.
I could rent R-rated movies.
And you could drive to the video store after 9 and rent R-rated movies.
Yes.
Yeah, those were big days for me too.
So I cannot remember reliably whether I walked or drove the roughly 3 miles from our home to the video store to rent a copy of Boogie Nights. I went down to the basement and waited until about an hour after my parents had come down to say goodnight to me and put on Boogie Nights. I was impressed with Julianne Moore's acting, performance, and fascinated by the copious substance abuse. And then came that scene at the end in which Marky Mark is standing in front of the mirror, and we see what is an, I believe, 13.5-inch prosthetic. My instant reaction was, followed by, I'm supposed to want to do what with that? Ew! And my reaction was that those things were ugly, and I didn't understand why so much of the human race was delighted with them. Recall I had never seen one before, so the thought made me very uncomfortable of what I was supposed to want to do with that thing. I don't recall specifically what vague minimum understanding of what I would have seen had I had a boyfriend would have been. I had no idea what it was normally supposed to look like, and that scene made me afraid of them. And what I've heard since is that modern kids find porn on the internet and they see that first, and they develop unnatural ideas of what to expect.
I'm going to decline to comment. Anyway, I want to be clear that Boogie Nights is pretty damn dark. And I think it kind of looks like the Jessie Spano special episode of Saved by the Bell, where she gets addicted to caffeine pills, compared to the abject horribleness of the real story and the people involved in it, who range from people whose choice is narrowed to depravity because of drug addiction to sociopathic scumbags. And I'll let you decide who's who. There are rock bottoms, and then there is John Holmes's rock bottom. You could argue that by starting his apex as one of the most well-known porn stars in the world was already kind of a rock bottom. But, just wait, it gets worse.
Before anyone thinks that they are being clever by pointing out that this is episode 69, yes, we know. I am proud that our podcast has survived this many episodes, and also embarrassed. I thought about trying to find a way to skip from episode 68 to 70, like old buildings not having a 13th floor, but that would make everything worse. I considered hiring a sex worker as a substitute host for myself on this episode so that I would not have to deal with there being an episode 69 or saying this is episode 69. But it wasn't in our budget because we still don't have enough downloads to turn on ads. So here I am, embarrassed and happy that we only have to do an episode 69 once.
Basically, we know what we did and we're ashamed of it. We should probably jump into talking about the movie, right?
Yeah. I had no idea what a stacked cast this was.
This cast is bananas. This cast is why I wish it was a TV series. As you know, I always want to spend more time with Tim Blake Nelson and plan our next midnight dogfight outing. I think he's actually adorable looking in this movie. His character's terrible.
For the record, dogfights are a scourge upon humanity and they shouldn't exist. And upon dogs. They are a scourge upon dogs. They're evil.
Yes, they're evil. And also, given his actual background, he went to Brown and studied classics. Also, in addition to being a stacked cast, I think that a lot of these performers do fabulous work in this movie. Val Kilmer is Val. He's good all the time. Kate Bosworth is really good. We mentioned Lisa Kudrow is excellent, and Ted Levine is a golden god. I'm always happy to see him and stuff. And then Josh Lucas is also great in this.
Also, Eric Bogosian, who I first became aware of as a child when he passed through town with a show called Pounding Nails in the Floor with My Forehead. I never saw Pounding Nails in the Floor with My Forehead. I just remember seeing the adverts for his performance at the McCarter Theater in local papers and thinking it was the coolest title I'd ever seen. It stayed with me. So we open on Kate Bosworth cowering in a dark and seedy room with her tiny dog while a rough-looking man pounds at the door. Also, the soundtrack is very well selected.
So where we started is June 29th, 1980, which is 2 days before the murders took place. And John has abandoned his once upon a time very underage, but now 19-year-old girlfriend, Dawn, at a motel while he goes out to score or whatever. They first had sex when she was 15 and he was 37. Do you need a moment?
She was only 15.
Only 15. She's 15.
You're 15.
You're beautiful and you're mine. Do you need a minute to throw up or are you good? Because
I'm good. I'm good.
So we're going to find out later why he's gone. But to be clear, also, Dawn had literally just come back to John 5 days before this. She had left to go back to her family and he groomed her back into the fold and promised her everything would be different. So she came back and he's already left her for days.
She has a small dog with her that I am shocked she manages to keep alive, let alone still have with her at the end of the film.
So she gets picked up by Carrie Fisher at this point. She's stuck outside because she's been thrown out of the hotel. And Carrie Fisher is playing this sort of holy roller sort of do-gooder who drives around, I guess, and picks people up. And this all really happened. John would leave her in a hotel room or in the car for hours or days. She'd sometimes be just sitting in the car with a coffee can to pee in, a pack of Diet Pepsi, and cigarettes while she waited for John to get drugs or do whatever it was that he was doing, or hustle. This is all very abject. They were living mostly out of his car.
So what's a holy roller?
A holy roller, just, somebody who's out there rolling for the Lord. It's a term that goes back to times past when people would become so possessed by the Lord in services that they would fall on the ground and bowl. If I recall correctly, I could also be totally making this up, but I'm pretty sure that is the truth. So yeah, it's just someone who's on fire for the Lord.
Like Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
So Carrie Fisher feeds her an unappealing bowl of what appears to be canned soup. I noticed that you never see anyone eating food in this movie. The closest to anyone getting any actual calories of nutrition is beer.
Yes.
And like bad beer.
Everyone is very, very, very busy doing drugs.
Yeah. But it's like nobody is getting any sustenance.
So she's calling John's answering service and being like, please come and get me. I'm at this woman's house. She's talking to me about demons.
And I noted that like she wasn't allowed to leave curse words with the answering service, which is just crazy now that we can text each other anything we want.
Yeah. And Val Kilmer shows up like a movie star, screeching up, and he is there to pick her up, whips off his sunglasses. He's got his briefcase.
Yeah, there's rock and roll playing, and in his first few scenes, you get the sense that this is how he sees himself or wants to by the musical choices, but it isn't what he is at all. Because you hear the sound of like a car screeching up. And first it's a moment of, oh, it's Val Kilmer as John Holmes. Val Kilmer it's one of these things where he has to work hard to not be dreamy. But everything about the man shrieks disaster.
Yeah, he is high as a kite. And he gives her drugs and they have sex in Carrie Fisher's bathroom.
I thought there's this moment where he shows her like the coke that he's brought, where he's like, and there's a high chance of snow, where he's doing the fake weather report is like a moment of Val Kilmer giving you like what you expect from him, from his turns as like smooth action hero, leading man persona. Like he's just switching on that charm for a moment.
Yeah.
And then
it's gone.
It's gone.
So I should mention here that the briefcase from which he removes the cocaine, he IRL carried a Samsonite briefcase with him everywhere. And in it was a bottle of Jack Daniels and all of his various drugs.
Yeah, but she forgives him everything. It's fun watching Carrie Fisher here because this is happening at a time where she was Princess Leia and she was doing a ton of cocaine herself, which makes me wonder if she ever crossed paths with anyone portrayed in this movie.
We talked in the Star 80 episode about how kind of thin the line is between famous and desperate in Hollywood. And the Wonderland gang is kind of proof of that. Paul Revere and the Raiders lived in that house. Like a lot of famous people strolled through there. The wife of one of the members of Three Dog Night actually went to the house the day after to try and buy some drugs and happened upon the crime scene. Also, like Jerry Brown lived on Wonderland Avenue. It was right in Laurel Canyon where all of like the rock stars of the day were living. I guess my answer to that is, did Carrie Fisher probably get drugs from the Wonderland gang at some point? Yes. Or Eddie Nash? Yes, probably. Either like directly or indirectly, because there was also, as we'll get to when we talk about Eddie Nash, a lot of drug dealing happening at his various bars and clubs as well.
John Holmes is a lousy house guest doing coke and having sex in the bathroom of someone you've just met. Not cool.
No, absolutely not. And he extracts her from Carrie Fisher's home and they drive off. We move on to the credits, which are a really crafty montage of maps of Los Angeles and the best of John Holmes's film work, such as it is.
Okay, also, one thing that I like that they did to show you the date, they showed you what was on TV at that time, but I feel like, I don't know if these were actual schedules because I saw a lot of names. I saw like Nash and Laverne and Shirley, and I was also like, wasn't there a ton of Drek on TV at the time too?
Yes, there's always Drek on TV. I'm going to guess that whatever they showed us was accurate based on what we know about the guys making this movie. They probably found a real newspaper. Now seems maybe a good time to mention, as we alluded to earlier, that, the porn industry really evolved alongside the rest of the film industry in the 1970s because it did become about storytelling and a little bit more about filmmaking, partially because they had to, but also, like because, film school was a thing now. Like one example, Bob Chin, the director and writer who created the Johnny Watts series, graduated from UCLA Film School. So Mom, wherever you are, my communications degree could be being put to worse use. I'm going to try and keep my Boogie Nights references to a minimum here because this is very much its own product. But there's a moment when they're shooting Dirk's first sex scene where Ricky Jay leans over to Burt Reynolds and he says, "It's a real film, Jack," which is something I quote all the time. And it's pointing precisely at that evolution of the industry. So his films were they were films.
I saw a clip from one, not a sex clip, where he's going after the bad guy and you see him walk around outside a boat and he finds the bad guy and they do what is supposed to be some kind of kickboxing. And you see him climb up on things, but it's not great.
Yeah. If I were to sit down and watch a bunch of pornos from the 70s, which, no, thank you.
No, thank you.
This is not something I have time for, but I could probably, point out various techniques. I am sure that Bob Chin is an outstanding filmmaker. I mean, I'm sure that he knows a lot about the craft of filmmaking and did what he could during his time to make those movies as artful as possible, on sometimes a one-day shooting schedule. He's written a memoir that's supposed to be pretty great. But also, we're at that point now. John can't perform, and his main source of income and for drugs are, performing errands for the Wonderland gang, hanging out with Eddie Nash, stealing from his ex-wife and his friends and neighbors. And also he has a racket where he steals luggage from arriving flights at LAX and then looks to see if there's good stuff in the luggage. He is just running scams for this $3,000 a day. So
wait, $3,000, that's is that $3,000 a day in 1980 money or 2025 money?
Let me look here because now I'm questioning whether or not.
Because that's over $900,000 a year.
Yeah, we did the math on it earlier and figured out that I think it's $3,000 a day in today's money, but it was $1,000 a day in their time, something like that. It's an unmanageable cost to keep his addiction in motion. He doesn't have a lot of ways to make money, but a lot of the ways that he makes money are illegal, or extra legal, and involve living a very desperate life.
Could Viagra have prolonged his film career today?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know if Viagra is the paper that covers crack cocaine's rock. I don't know if Viagra can overcome cocaine in all of its forms. I don't know how that works. I am not a doctor. The every 15 minutes part of it also seems like that would be incredibly disruptive. So we see him and Dawn pull up to the Wonderland house, and John exits the car and she's just sitting in there. We see her doing the emptying the can out the window.
Yeah, she says that he has to pee and he gives her an empty beverage can, and what a principle among men. And as I'm just thinking of her hands and not being near a faucet because nobody's aim is that good.
God, the infections.
And he tells her to think of her favorite ride at Disneyland while he runs in, which emphasizes how young she is.
Yes, it does. You want to be sad? They rented the Wonderland house for $750 a month.
That is sad.
Yes, and the house is still there. It's been gutted and renovated and probably staged and also exercised. I also really when he gets back in the car after a VCR is thrown through the window and he comes out with a bunch of money.
This will not be the first time in this movie that we see consumer electronics flagrantly destroyed.
We get a real 360 of this VCR throwing, but we see them drive away and he it's really kind of like great actor work that you get to see here for a few minutes of him and Kate Bosworth. I kept thinking about him as an actor making these choices to show the kind of the charm that would make Dawn stick around despite the exceptional amounts of abuse that she suffered. And the way that he beat her and pimps her out when they need money. I liked their interplay because there was like a sweetness there that I was like, that's Val Kilmer work.
At one point in the middle of this ride, he jokes that they should just be friends until she's 20. Ew.
He takes her now to another hotel. He's taking the briefcase filled with freebase to God knows where, and time is passing and she waits for him, never leaving the room, and we see the passage of time through TV shows. It's July 1st, and John gets back to the hotel and is bugged out and tired and a little weird.
She says, stay with me because freebasing takes you far away, but he lights that pipe up.
She sees the news broadcast about murders at Wonderland Avenue. And it's the announcer says, this is the most horrific crime scene I've witnessed in my career, as brutal as the Sharon Tate killing of 1968. And I get annoyed every time I hear this because I'm like, it was 1969. But then find out, listening to the audio commentary, they were reusing footage of the reporter, and they also got him to come back to shoot new footage that incorporated with the old footage. So
he messed it up on air.
Yeah, he had messed it up on air.
Wow.
Yes. And then we cut to Dylan McDermott playing David Lynn, who was a loosely affiliated member of the Wonderland gang. He was a petty criminal who had also been convicted of assault to commit rape. He's not a great guy. And he met Ron Launius, who we'll meet soon, in prison, and joined up with them a few weeks prior to the murders. He sees the news on in a bar, and he's trying to call the house, and we see a very bloody phone off the hook. His beard and fake hair are not great, and apparently the beard is actually real. That's what they said in the audio commentary. I don't know if I was supposed to pick up on sarcasm there, but it looks fake as shit.
Yeah, I heard that David Lind was in real life a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, which is also, it's another not great thing about him.
Yeah, he was a white supremacist.
No.
He then freaks out to a friend of his about what's going on, and his friend calls two LAPD detectives. They're not named Tom Lang and Bob Sousa, but that's what I'm going to call them because those are their real names. And he goes up to the Wonderland house where they find Lind looking around and just seeing all of the crime scene.
So I'm surprised. I don't understand how he can enter the crime scene, and I'm surprised that the cops are okay with Lind smashing a TV because he's destroying things at a crime scene. I wonder if this counts as our gratuitous biopic furniture destruction quota for the week.
I think it does. So Tom Lang, as I'm calling him, is played by the great Ted Levine. And he with his partner, who's played by an actor named Frankie G, give us some good narrative pipeline about a man named Eddie Nash, real name Adel Nasraha. He moved to the U.S. with nothing and became a kingpin in L.A. He had 37 liquor licenses on various bars, and he was, essentially a gangster. And we know that Eddie Nash had something to do with these murders. He was basically like the scumbag Walt Disney impresario of the LA club scene.
Mm-hmm.
He had a theme bar for everyone. He too has an insane freebase habit and does 2 to 3 ounces of that a day.
So we should attempt to clarify for our gentle and sheltered listeners exactly how much cocaine that is. Also, I feel at this point like it would have behooved us to maybe find a recovered addict who could answer questions like, how much coke is in 2 to 3 ounces? How is freebasing different from crack? Why can't you crush crack up and turn it back into cocaine? Why do crack if you can afford coke? What is the ounce use weight for a functioning non-addicted drug user who maybe does one or a few lines of other people's coke like a couple times a month and has no trouble walking away when it's time to start a family? I'm not even sure crack was around yet in 1981. As a thing that I could have researched before the episode, except that it's only occurring to me just now, I told my mother that she should probably not listen to this episode, but if our moms are listening, I think the fact that I don't, off the top of my head, know the answer to questions like, why can't you crush crack up and turn it back into cocaine, like really bad cocaine, but still sort of cocaine, is a sign that she succeeded as a parent.
I agree.
But shouldn't they have taught us this stuff in the DARE program, Sarah?
I mean, this walks real closely up to information we can use and be empowered by as we went out on our misadventures through life and learned the wrong lessons from the DARE program. I do think I can confidently answer that you can't crush crack up and turn it back into cocaine because it is a chemical change.
Okay.
That I feel really good about.
Okay.
That's literally it. One of the fellas on the last podcast on the left episodes about John Holmes and the Wonderland murders called freebasing the least effective way to do cocaine, which it does sound like. Just it sounds like there's a lot of process and it doesn't work very well.
Yeah, and then when they're in the car and one of the cops are describing who Eddie Nash is, one of them keeps saying, Jesus Christ, Eddie Nash. But the closest that Eddie Nash gets to Jesus Christ is that he was born about 18 miles from Bethlehem.
I don't think that Jesus would have been comfortable in the late 70s, early 80s Los Angeles club scene.
No.
Not even...
Although he loved sinners.
He did love sinners. I mean, not even if Eddie Nash opened like a Bethlehem-themed bar where you could walk on water.
Or you said, hey, there'd be a manger.
Yes.
With a floor show.
Of his 37 clubs, there could have been one like that. I don't think he would have been a good fit for this scene. So we find out while they're talking to Dylan McDermott that his girlfriend, Barbara, was at the house and she did not make it. Barbara Richardson, the woman who he was in love with, was very young and she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had nothing to do with any of this beyond being David's girlfriend and being asleep on the couch there, which is sad. We get the backstory about when they came in a few weeks before, and we see Barbara alive. She's played by Natasha Gregson Wagner. She looks exactly like her mother. And there's a really great tracking shot through the house. And you know I love a tracking shot.
So is there any time that you would say someone had unnecessary tracking shots?
Yes, absolutely. The movie Atonement, there's a tracking shot it's a very like accomplished tracking shot of the beach of Dunkirk as they're trying to evacuate it. But it gets to a point where it feels gratuitous, where it's like Joe Wright is doing it to be like, look at this cool thing I'm doing. Look at this tracking shot. Just because it's impressive when you can do it, but it also didn't feel narratively essential. But if you can do a great tracking shot, do a great tracking shot.
The party and the gang sound downright wholesome in Lynn's memory. He's like, it was such a great time to be alive. Everyone's so happy. And he makes it all look so rosy. Dylan McDermott was a clean-cut leading man on one of the network lawyer shows around this time. So I bet his agent or his manager or whoever does whatever the hell they do, whatever task in Hollywood, probably sold him on it as a chance to show range.
We also meet Joy Miller, who is played by Janeane Garofalo. She's the ex-wife of a Hollywood lawyer who got caught up in the life of addiction and got into a relationship with Billy Deverell, who is her boyfriend, who's played by Tim Blake Nelson, who I mentioned up top. He also is a murderer and a drug addict and a criminal. And then Ron Launius, who is played by Josh Lucas. He has a great entrance moment in this movie.
He's like swinging guns around with his shirt off.
I think Slow Ride is playing. It's not quite De Niro and Jumpin' Jack Flash in Mean Streets, but it's a good entrance. It's an I've arrived, I'm Josh Lucas. It's pretty badass. But these are our victims and the gang, and we will meet his wife, Susan Launius, later.
Ron Launius sounds like a great guy, according to David Lind.
Oh, yeah, terrific dude. Just maybe 30 unsolved potential murders.
Wow.
Just that, yeah, not NBD. Also worth mentioning, Ron Launius was dishonorably discharged from the military during Vietnam because he was running heroin from Nam in soldiers' caskets. Can we meditate on what it takes to be dishonorably discharged from the American military at the height of the Vietnam War?
I just want to see what that hearing looks like.
Like, you've forced our hand. We have to get rid of you. I think, like, Ron Launius, the real person, did nothing to deserve his dope introduction in this movie.
It makes them sound like a fantastic bunch of people in his memory. Like, the party makes you feel so good to be alive. And you get clues like when they all really want drugs, including the woman who just beat cancer, which gives you a clue that the life was not so damn good.
Yeah, Joy Miller was our recent breast cancer survivor. We also, in this flashback, meet the John Holmes of Dylan McDermott, of David Lynn's memory, which is a really like a needy, spazzy loser. And they use him as kind of a performing monkey at these parties because he was so beholden to them and so in need of getting drugs from them.
I almost feel sorry for him at this point. Almost. They'd make him whip it out for some girl at the party, and then she asks, like, "Ooh, can I touch it?" And you can see it's humiliating for him. And I thought about this later in the film when his estranged wife, played by Lisa Kudrow, calls him a whore.
He is very literally a sex worker. Also, the jury's out on whether they actually did this to him, although I think they probably did.
Yeah.
There's people who argue that he just told Dawn and Sharon that in order to get sympathy and make it seem like they deserved what happened to them. But, I mean, they probably did. So we've kind of find out like where this all started. Ron has these antique guns. Ron is a weapons nut. He loves collecting old weapons. And he asks John to trade the guns for drugs with Eddie Nash. And we've got a whole bunch of unreliable narrators and many of them dead. Who knows what actually happened here? The story is that Eddie held onto the guns as collateral, gave John some drugs, and told him to screw off. They were too fancy and too easy to track to fence them. So he goes back and they're pretty pissed off at him for not coming back with drugs for anyone except for the drugs that he did by himself with Eddie. They're really pissed at him for this. And apparently there was some other stuff. He maybe would rip them off occasionally when running errands for them.
How was Eddie Nash able to run an business empire while this high all the time?
I mean, I'm guessing he had really good people working for him, which I've been made to understand is truly the secret of running a successful business, that if you're the leader, one of your talents should be hiring really good people.
But isn't your judgment of character supposed to also be totally off when you're that messed up all the time?
Yes.
Also, at one point he says they did something on his daughter's mirror.
Yes, on her vanity. Yeah, he does have children. His daughter, later in life, got him to sign over a power of attorney to her while he was in jail or in prison. And she completely ripped him off. So
serves him right.
Happy ending for Eddie Nash.
Sounds like he was a fantastic parent.
I'm sure that any child that would do that to their parent really had a ton of respect for their upbringing. And learned all the right lessons.
I mean, he was mad at them for messing with her vanity.
He was. I mean, I'm sure that he thought he loved his children in a positive way. I would also speculate probably too that a lot of these businesses kind of ran themselves enough, and also Eddie had a very lucrative, side gig of drug dealing. I think he kind of followed his bliss on that, like they tell you to do in college. So they're really pissed at John for ripping them off, and he comes back to them with this plan to rob Eddie. So they draw up a map of the house, and John is going to leave the door open for them to go in and rob him. So David positions himself as like the voice of morality in his telling. He's saying like, we shouldn't do this, but he's going to go with them to the robbery to protect Ron. And also at this point too, we meet our final Wonderland victim, Susan, who's played by Christina Applegate. She wanted this role because she grew up near the Wonderland house and hearing stories about it.
So I had no idea that this was Christina Applegate. I have zero wig perception. My sense of other people's identity is dependent on their hair color.
That makes sense. She definitely doesn't look like herself in this, and she's in it for a very short period of time. IRL, when they came up with this scheme, things were really dire for the Wonderland gang. Hanger wrote about this in his article. They had recently sold a pound of baking soda for $250,000.
Oh, good God.
And now there were contracts out on their lives. So they were in a lot of trouble when the scheme to rob Eddie Nash was cooked up. I think I was naive enough when I saw the E! True Hollywood story to be like, well, why didn't they call the cops? And not realizing like drug dealers don't call the cops on each other.
You can't call the cops on people for lying about selling you an illegal thing when you meant to get an illegal thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not illegal to sell people baking soda, nor is it illegal to grossly overcharge for baking soda.
There's no law in the books about that. And then you're like, but it's fraud. And it's like, well, what is it fraud for? Heroin? And then you've got a problem. So the plan is John is going to go to the house. He's going to buy drugs. He's going to leave the back door open. Eddie and John, as I mentioned, one of the things they share with each other is their love of freebasing. Eddie Nash, like, inexplicably loved John Holmes and seemed to think he was a huge star. Eddie had a lot of ins around town between the cops and the fire department with wealthy people. And as I mentioned, he was a drug dealer. He had a lot of powers. His love for hanging around with John Holmes is kind of strange.
I did enjoy watching him fanboy out. Like, Johnny, what? I've seen all your movies.
Also, when they robbed Eddie, he was on day 10 of a binge.
That's crazy.
Which sounds like a real delight to be around.
I'm sure that everyone and their breath smelled fantastic.
Absolutely. Eddie is played by Eric Bogosian, who is way too healthy looking to fully embody Eddie Nash, who was at this point in his addiction covered in burns and weighed about 100 pounds. But he's really good in this. And they tell a story in the audio commentary where he was cast at the last minute. And he had been working on some role that hadn't come to fruition where he was going to have a Lebanese accent. And he's like, I think I can just move it over a few countries and turn this into an Eddie Nash accent. And he really does a great job at it. In David Lynn's memory, the robbery goes mostly okay, except for an accidental discharge of a gun in which they shoot Eddie Nash's bodyguard.
Wait, is that the one where he yells racial slurs at the guy while holding him to the floor, or is that a different?
That's the other version. This is the one where it's hijinks and all shucks.
The one where they're just great people having a good time, leading the life. Also, I love Eric Bogosian and everything, and I think he's an example of an actor who really came into his own later in life. He's had so many great TV roles the past few years.
To see someone evolve and keep getting better at their craft as time goes on. But yeah, the robbery is great. Everybody's happy. They're super triumphant when they get home and we see how much they scored, and it is a lot. It's about $1.2 million in guns, drugs, and jewelry. Everybody celebrates by getting high and passing out. Is cut. And saying that he deserves more than what he got. He's talking about editors that he owes money to.
And Dawn later says he hasn't made a movie in 2 years.
Well, this is because in Boogie Nights, there's that whole sequence where we see the movie that Julianne Moore Amber made about Dirk Diggler right after William H. Macy kills himself at the New Year's Eve party. She's making a documentary about him. So where I'm going with all of this. So this was based on a real thing, which was a documentary that John Holmes is in called Exhausted. that is his kind of attempt to present himself against the world. Also, for a certain age range, Corey Haim made a movie like this called Me, Myself, and I to try and prove to everyone that he wasn't completely addicted to drugs.
But people do that movie when they're completely addicted to drugs. It's like when Gia went on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, or like when Whitney Houston did Diane Sawyer to be like, crack is whack. Speaking of whack.
No.
And so when he's talking about that, like one of the reasons he needed to score was he owed the editors of that film money that they were not going to give him the movie until he paid them. So that's that.
But again, unreliable narrator.
Yeah, David Lynn is very clear that they said no one was allowed in the house again except close associates, and that John was the only one who knew the robbery happened. So it had to be him who set them up to be murdered. We cut back to John and Dawn in the hotel and the cops busting in on them. She gets brought to the police station and asked questions about the house, which she claims not to know, and then gets shown a picture of Eddie's house. And we find out that John has at times pimped her out to Eddie, which is so icky.
And she looks so young when he pimps her to Eddie.
Yes. Whatever happens to Dawn in there, which I have on good authority based on other stuff I have read and listened to, is very bad. We see her come out and look very traumatized. And then we cut to seeing Dawn sitting in the tub and her eyes are very dark and he's scrubbing her. And that's also bad. And this shit's even darker when you have the context of the following. Eddie liked novelty and fresh, clean women. So that's why they're lying about who she is.
When he says the name Gabrielle, and when Eddie later gives the name Gabrielle, did John Holmes really have a niece named Gabrielle that he told the girl to use the name of?
He did not have a real niece named Gabrielle, but he lied to Eddie and said that that was his niece.
His niece?
Yeah.
I don't know which of them that makes scumbaggier.
This particular event that they're showing us here transpired on Christmas Eve, which is also Dawn's birthday. And you see her eyes are dark here, and her eyes are actually black because they cut a sequence where John kicks the shit out of her, which is something he did regularly because she let him pimp her out. John would beat her up.
He beat her up for letting him pimp her out.
Yes.
How does that work?
What about it doesn't make sense to you?
Everything. Like, he's a man and she's a small girl.
It's her fault. You shouldn't have let him do that.
How could she not let him do it? Where does letting any come into that? I'm so confused.
That's addict logic there, and that's abuser logic. So he would beat her up all the time when he would pimp her out.
I mean, I'd love to see Val Kilmer try to sell that as a response.
I mean, the filmmakers recognize that would cause the audience to turn in a way on Val Kilmer and John Holmes that would be like beyond. That said, if anyone could make it work, it would be Val Kilmer.
Yeah, he was a very brave actor.
Yeah. They end up bringing Dawn to Sharon, to John's wife, who is Lisa Kudrow, as we mentioned. She has nowhere else she can go. And in real life, Sharon had a good relationship with Dawn, which seems weird until you know that Sharon basically stopped having any kind of relationship resembling an intimate relationship with John after he started his career. They lived more like roommates / mother, son / besties. She was essentially sort of like a parent to John and to Dawn.
That is weird.
Yeah.
First of all, I love Lisa Kudrow in this role, as I said before.
Yeah. This is just a good reminder that Lisa Kudrow was the best actor on that show.
Yeah.
We find out more of that backstory about Dawn trying to get away and how he got her back. John is at a hotel where he has holed up with the police, saying that he'll tell them everything. Good scam that he runs there.
I found out that Sharon was a virgin when she married Dawn.
I can't even.
Yeah.
He's worked out a good scam where he's staying in a hotel and kind of leading them on about what he will and will not tell them. And Dawn and Sharon go to meet him there, and he lets them know they can go into witness protection immediately if he takes a deal with the cops. And she doesn't want to do that. And who could blame her? Witness protection with him would make being tracked with Henry Hill look like paradise.
The part where Holmes is asleep with the two women, on either side of him is the closest we see to him being happy in the film. His addict math on how awesome it will be to go into witness protection with Dawn and Sharon reminds me of Liz Taylor and Richard Burton living on a yacht to get away from taxes in Liz and Dick, except that he makes them look like CPAs by comparison. He's like so happy about, we can all go to witness protection together. And it's like, what? No, why is this a good idea?
Yeah, like
what on earth makes you think this will work as a living arrangement?
How is that math going to play out? Like, are they going to pretend she's their daughter? So here's where MC Gainey shows up as John's handler in the LAPD. John Holmes had been a rat to the LAPD for years before this. So he already had like people in the LAPD and in Vice specifically who knew who he was, because he would call in sometimes his own films to the cops that were shooting, but also certainly like rival films that he'd hear about, because he had an ongoing relationship with them in terms of turning people in to keep himself out of trouble. And we see that he's playing really coy. We start to get a sense of what happened according to John. He has a lot of mean shit to say about everyone who's been murdered, and also about David Lynn, and he says not to believe a word that David says.
I enjoy the use of unreliable narrators here, and the Rashomon thing, the way the story is different from everyone, so you see everyone playing a different version of themselves based on the story at different times, and who's telling it and how they look. The way that David Lynn's first version of Ron is different from John's Ron. The only person in this movie who I would ever trust is Sharon.
I mean, she's the only one who is not dependent on narcotics.
Yeah.
And that is why you could trust her. We see Eddie and John meet on a boat with Paris Hilton, and all I can guess is that she invested in the film, but I don't know why she's there. It's a quick shot of her. She doesn't speak. This is one thing I don't care for, but she's there. It's fine. And they're playing the song Girls on Film, which came out 12 days after the murders. You know how I am about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we see that John in John's version is the voice of reason in his own memories. We see all of the same scenes, except John is the hero and David and Ron are extra insane. John is warning Eddie to look out, and he's not listening because it's day 9 of his binge. We see like once the robbery happens, the gang is telling everyone and calling everyone and telling them they ripped off Eddie.
He makes them look like the dumbest criminals, and they were kind of dumb criminals.
Yeah, like I think like everything is true in this story. Like I think like they are dumb criminals. I think Eddie Nash was a man in a state of like cocaine psychosis. John Holmes was a hustler and a liar and also an addict. Like I think everyone's doing a lot of addict logic and a lot of addict, treatment of others. So after the robbery, John decides to go see Eddie and things go bad fast. IRL, what happened was he was seen by the bodyguard somewhere wearing one of Eddie's rings.
Oh, man.
So he got brought in to go chat with Eddie, and then he held him there. Things go bad real fast, and he's being beaten and tied up, and the recollections of the robbery are way worse. Eddie's furious about all the things that took place, and, David called his bodyguard a couple of names that we don't say on this show, and they were really violent and awful in the house. And supposedly at this point, John is told by Eddie that he'll kill everyone he knows in his address book, which he has in his hands, which I don't believe for a second Eddie Nash is going to waste his time sending someone to drive around the country to kill all of John Holmes's relatives before they kill John Holmes. I think he would have absolutely killed John Holmes.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's gonna expend the energy and the risk of sending someone out on a murder spree. But John uses this as sort of justification for everything that's going to happen, because he's like, they were going to kill kill you, Sharon. And she's like, yeah, no, I don't think they were. Okay.
Yeah, so wait, is Paris Hilton just supposed to be some chick on the boat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just don't think that Eddie had to try as hard as he did to convince John to get in on a revenge plot on the Wonderland gang, just given the animosity there, given the fact that John owed them money, that they hated John, they were mean to him, and now they had ripped off Eddie. Like, I think he was an easy sell on that. He probably waved like a couple of rocks under his nose and he was like, cool, yeah, here's who did it, here's why, and we should totally go kill them.
Okay. So the version that we see honestly, I'm not sure what I can make out from what I think might be Susan's recollection, because you can see she's messed up.
Yes. And then, so the interview doesn't work. And Tom Lang and Bob Sousa were very frustrated in this situation. In Malice in Wonderland, the book that Tom Lang wrote, he kind of alludes to the idea that Eddie was being protected from the inside and they could never go after him for this crime because of his relationships throughout the various institutions of law and order in Los Angeles. But they also just feel like maybe John just set them up from the beginning, which is giving John an awful lot of credit.
A lot of credit.
I kind of like lean more towards the accidental help that this gave him, and that the addict logic was all coming together. But I think like giving him that level of intelligence is maybe a little overselling it. So we see them, John's been released from custody pending further investigation. He's been told not to leave town, but he's going to leave town anyway. We see John and Dawn are going to take off. They're at Sharon's house. She's like telling him, here's some money. And he's like, I'll pay you back. And she's like, no, this is money for you to stay the hell away from me. Please leave. And she tells Dawn in a really supportive way, like to take care of herself. And
somehow Dawn still has that poor little dog who
I can't believe that dog is
alive. Or I'm always watching for continuity on, did she leave the dog?
Yeah. No, that dog's okay. And then we see Sharon's flashback of remembering the night that John showed up at her house in the middle of the night, July 1st, and he's covered in blood and he's very disoriented. And he says that he's been in an accident and he gets in her bathtub and she's trying to help him clean off.
And she realizes that he has no wound, it's someone else's blood.
Yeah, and she's just asking him, whose blood is this, John? Whose blood is this? And it is a real yikes moment. And they get into a very big fight about this, where they're kind of just rehashing what went on between them, how the relationship fell apart. It's effective narrative, and also it's a really devastating interaction. They're both so good. John is telling her, like, I'm still alive and those people are dead. And he's telling her, like, they got what they deserved.
Everyone involved in the Nash robbery is a scummy person.
Everyone's bad in this movie.
Yeah.
Everyone's bad. Not everyone. Kate Bosworth.
Except Lisa Kudrow.
Lisa Kudrow is not bad, and Dawn is not bad either. Dawn is very much a victim. It's another like, oh my God, these are both really amazing actors. And in the commentary track, they talked about this scene and how good they both were. Another thing I want to mention, because it is independent film, like they shot this on a rigorous schedule and endless hours, and they were on like hour 16. When they got to this point, Lisa Kudrow was talking to the director about how Val is just the best. And she said that she'd never worked with someone who was so present in a scene, and how he is such a generous actor because he brings you with him when he's present and elevates your game. Like, you want to be as good as him and he's going to let you be as good as him. And I love that. I love him so much.
And it's his fourth time on the show.
I don't know what kind of person he was. I know from like his kids, like how they saw him. But he seems like he was a really great colleague. And good actors do that. They bring you along and don't make it about themselves. They treat it as an interplay. And I would just imagine that it was tremendous to work with him in this setting under these circumstances. So yeah, I'm so sad that he is gone.
Yeah, and he lost his voice.
I can't. So sad. We see Lang and Susan go to visit Susan Launius, who is still in the hospital, and oh boy, is she in bad shape. Susan barely survived, and it was basically like dumb luck of the way her skull split in her head and the bones shattered. Like there was some like science about like the way her bones broke in her skull that protected her from dying. She was able to testify when John Holmes goes to trial, which I'll talk about in a second, but she remembered nothing. And we see through her the way the murders as they likely happened. And it's quite awful. And I am glad the lights don't come on. The noise, the Foley work is outstanding in this scene.
Is the Foley work here as good as the potato salad in Florence Foster Jenkins?
I would say that the Foley work was a different challenge because it involved pipe hitting bone. It sounds as icky as the potato salad, but it's way worse. Like, I can be real here. It's way worse. We see the way that they think this unfolded, which is that John buzzed in with the intent of allowing Eddie's goons, including his bodyguard, go in there with pipes. And his bodyguard was known to carry a pipe, Gregory Dials. It's like an open shut case. Technically, no one's ever been sent to prison for these murders, but people know what happened and the clues are all there. But they go in with pipes and they beat everyone to death. And it's quite awful. And at the end, we see them hand a pipe to John.
So it was just David Lynn's dumb luck that he wasn't there.
Yes, very much. And another guy named Tracy McCourt, who was their getaway driver for the robbery, just dumb luck that he wasn't there because he was creeped out and was like, after the robbery, and was like, I don't want to hang out here. And left, and that saved his life.
So I'm confused. What made them think they could rob Eddie Nash?
I don't know. I've been made to understand that a lot of terrible things seem like good ideas when you're on drugs.
Oh, yeah.
Or when you need drugs.
Well, sure, like you're a knitter and sometimes you need to knit so bad you use acrylic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The exact same thing. Yeah, and you're like, oh, I never thought I'd do something like that for knitting.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen.
You need help.
I do need help. The depravity of my knitting addiction has taken me to some really dark places.
Unnatural fibers.
Yes. $3.99 for a skein of yarn at Michael's.
Mass market stores selling acrylic, Sarah. What are you doing with your life?
I don't know, but it's not unlike ripping off a drug kingpin. Their deaths were like incredibly grisly. You can watch, if you are so inclined, of the videotape of the crime scene after it happened and when the cops were first called. I've watched a little bit of that. I don't recommend it. It's disgusting and not something that any human needs to see. Cops need to see that, and they did end up using it in court. It was the first time they used, I think, video footage of a crime scene in a court case. It's nothing that anyone needs to see, but the internet provides if it's something you're interested in.
Did it make any difference that the victims were scumbags?
It did, and I will talk about that in a moment. Okay. And suddenly, after we see John take the pipe and hit Ron Launius a few times and also see him leave a very telling handprint on the wall, we cut to him waking up in the car and we see a hyper-saturated Hollywood scene. It reminds me a lot of the beginning of Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Like, it's very technicolor and bright of the two of them, and he's like waking up from a dream, and it seems like everything's gonna be okay for these two kids, and we see him drive away with them and we get a little bit of the aftermath, but that is the end of our movie.
It went by really fast. There's no trial that we see and no real answers on who done it. It's about process over product. My takeaway is that John Holmes would have been a lot better off had his penis been 8 inches, perhaps 7 inches, but that is probably true for most men.
Indeed.
Because there's that scene with Sharon where they're fighting and she says, "You picked that disgusting thing over us."
Yeah, he did. So just a little bit of aftermath here. Dawn and John escape to Florida, where you want to escape, and are there for a few months when Dawn's brother goes out to Florida with the cops from Los Angeles and convinces Dawn to come home with him.
What are Dawn and John doing in Florida?
Well, she is being pimped out and he is beating her up for allowing herself to be pimped out by him.
But that's not funny.
It's not funny, but it is true.
How? But he does it over and over
Yeah,
again.
he's an abusive monster. And he has groomed her since she was a child. He's not a good person. So she's doing that to make money. They're living in kind of a hotel that doesn't sound very nice, where she's working as a chambermaid and he's doing odd jobs. But things are not great. The LAPD is looking for him. And her brother eventually calls the cops and connects with them. And they go to Florida. He's like, "Please come home." And she does. And the cops also now at this point have John. He is arrested and put on trial for the Wonderland murders. He had left a palm print that had him there. The streets were talking about what went on there. Apparently, like, as soon as the Wonderland murders happened, everybody kind of knew it was Eddie Nash, but there wasn't a whole lot that could be done without evidence. Their star witness, though, was David Lind. He's not your ideal witness. Tom Lang famously said, when a murder takes place in hell, you can't expect angels as your witnesses.
I love it.
But I guess, like, it was just too far. And Susan testified, but had so little memory of anything. And John would be acquitted for those murders. Eddie Nash was eventually charged in California state court with a bunch of RICO stuff, including having planned the murders. And he got away with that. He had a hung jury. And a second trial ended in straight up acquittal for Nash and also for his bodyguard, Gregory Diles. Tales have been told that Eddie Nash maybe bribed a juror or two, but I wasn't there. I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Also in 1990 in that trial, enter Scott Thorson.
Who?
Okay, so as I mentioned, a lot of corkboard and red thread to be had. Tom Lang was one of the detectives on O.J. Simpson. And Scott Thorson was Liberace's former boyfriend.
Oh.
The one that he made to look like him, played by Matt Damon. He was also addicted to drugs, and he was at Eddie Nash's house on the night that John Holmes was threatened, was hauled in and tied up and threatened. And he was a witness to hearing those conversations of Eddie Nash telling him, like, "You're going to go back and you're going to get revenge on these people along with my bodyguard and bring back their eyeballs in a bag."
Great.
Yeah, so Scott Thorson was there and has talked about it plentifully. He is also in the Michael Connelly show that I mentioned, and talks about his experience there. He has written a book called Under the Candelabra, in which the special is based. It's really interesting. Susan Launius survived. Her whereabouts were unknown, but she has passed away. Sharon passed away in 2012. And I think also, just to mention here, I think the real, like, happy story here is of Dawn Schiller. So I mentioned she did go back to her family. She also got her MA in Women's Studies. She has worked extensively and written and educated extensively about sex trafficking, abuse, trauma, the media, addiction, and recovery. She wrote her own memoir, and she teaches workshops about memoir writing. And she was, she was a long way down in terms of, like, she basically never had a chance to begin with. She met John when she was 15. After a lifetime of neglect from her own parents. And he groomed her and used her that whole time and beat her. She certainly has made a life for herself. And has really done a lot of good. So there's no awards talk tonight, unfortunately.
I think this film was ahead of its time.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. It's kind of a bummer. I wouldn't tell everyone to run out and see it. It's not for everyone, but it's very good. Did you have any choice dialogue?
I did. There were two things that stood out to me, and those were, I am clean, all right. Cleaner. And you chose that disgusting thing over us, John.
Did he? We haven't talked a lot about John Holmes, the person before his life in the porn industry, but he also came from a very traumatic background. He had a very abusive stepfather, and he also comes from a very bad place, but it's also like duly noted, he comes from a bad place. Doesn't give him passage to beat people or sit in on murders. So anyway, shall we score this thing?
Sarah, can you please give our listeners a quick refresher on how we score movies?
I'd be happy to. We rate movies on a scale of 1 to 10 across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to issues particular to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
So for outward appearances, makeup, and hair, I gave it a 6, which is like average, but a little off for Mulrooney's look in this. For acting and casting, I gave it an 8. For passage of time, I gave it a 6. Costuming, 5. Quality of the script, 7. Accuracy, I deferred to you and gave it a 7 since you were the one who would have known. Storytelling, 7.5. Production value, 6. Production, direction, decision-making, 7. And do we care 4?
Okay.
That comes to 6.35, which is a decent score, worth watching.
Absolutely. So my scores are as follows. Outward appearances, 7. Acting and casting, 9. Passage of time, 7. Costuming, 7. Quality of the script, 9. Accuracy, 10. Storytelling, 8. Production value, 8. Production and direction decision making, 8. And do we care, 6. Like, I care about some of the people, but not all of them.
Yeah, I think we're reflective of that this is a Sarah movie.
Yes, and I think as, again, Sai, a scholar of the Wonderland murders, I was very excited by the accuracy with which they told this story. My score came out to a 7.9, which, what was yours?
6.35.
That's a 7.125, which is a very respectable score for a movie that deserves a second look.
So, Wonderland, you did not earn second opinion, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You're still way better than people gave you credit for.
100%. So, other stuff you should watch instead.
I think this film is worth watching.
Absolutely.
Boogie Nights, with the caveats that we talked about at the very beginning. Eric Bogosian's recent performances in Interview with the Vampire, Succession, and Billions are all so good.
Agreed. So I would also recommend definitely check out Boogie Nights on top of this if you haven't. That P.T. Anderson is going places, I hear. But also, all of the source material I mentioned is really worth a look. Particularly Mike Sager's journalism. I have 2 books of his, The Devil and John Holmes and Other Stories. And then another one called Scary Monsters and Super Freaks. He's really good at the journalism that kind of like digs into celebrity and seediness and desperation. And then also, I would also recommend too that you pay a visit to Dawn Schiller's website, dawnschiller.com. And take a look at her book called The Road Through Wonderland. And also very touchingly, Val Kilmer and Kate Bosworth both wrote forewords for that book. You know, she really took all of these experiences and turned them into something pretty extraordinary. I want to always exercise care in shouting out a narrative where one person was able to survive and thrive through terrible odds, because it's a hard world out there. You know, we hate social safety nets in this country, but I think that she deserves to be celebrated for putting her life on an entirely different trajectory after a terrible first 20 years. And not only that, but also doing the kind of work to reach back and help others up the ladder instead of being the kind of person who pulls up the ladder after themselves, which I don't think is always instinctual to people. Incredible. And she deserves that kind of applause. And it's nice that it's nice that someone in this story came out with a sort of a transcendent ending. I don't want to call it a happy ending because that's also bogus, but was able to overcome so much trauma and give back to the world. Anyway,
I also wanted to recommend, if you are thinking about Halloween this year, go through your old family photo albums. If you have a parent or grandparent or someone who was raised in the 1950s, and look at the toys, because I went home this past weekend and I discovered that virtually every toy from the 50s was creepy. And in particular, we found this one where you said it looked like a sleep paralysis demon.
I don't even remember which one that was because I feel like I thought that about every single toy
that I found in my
Yeah.
family photo albums from the
Each one-
50s.
Each one was scarier than the last.
It was the one called Smiley the Clown, where it's shaped like a rotund bowling ball, and the face painted on it, I was told by somebody else, resembles John Wayne Gacy.
I will back that. I
But
will back that up.
It's frightening.
It could be where he got his entire persona.
When I Googled Smiley the Clown 1950s toy, I pulled up some very creepy images, but not the specific toy.
Like, you know that clown is made out of lead. What is happening? So yeah, if you're still on the fence about what to go as for Halloween, Smiley the Clown.
Yeah, the 1950s toy, if you can find the one that looks like a bowling and has the John Wayne Gacy makeup painted onto it.
That's the one. So before we go, we have to apologize for something we said in a previous episode that turned out to be misinformation, and we are sorry for this.
We were wrong. Sometimes we're wrong.
Yes. Rena, what were we, specifically me, wrong about?
Sarah, you called Denver Pyle Gomer Pyle in the Bonnie and Clyde episode.
Yes, I misidentified noted character actor and star of Dukes of Hazzard, Denver Pyle. I called him Gomer Pyle, who is a fictional character from the Andy Griffith Show in the episode. And he may sue me, or his children and his widow may sue me, not unlike the way Frank Hamer's widow and child sued Warner Brothers for the misportrayal of him. He is not Gomer Pyle, and I am sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Pyle. I'm not going to mention your first name because we don't want to get you confused again.
I am also sorry. No one deserves to be misidentified. Anyway, a couple of notes before we close out. After that, our podcast baby has matured and we have launched a Patreon, just simply enough for it to defray some of our costs associated with bringing our show to you. Platform hosting, recording, research. We occasionally have to order a book off the internet. We also sometimes pay for movie rentals or to go to the theater. We are offering shout outs and access to our awful first 3 episodes to anyone who chips in for us. For now, there will be better things in the future. With that, we'd love to thank Brandon and Gates, who are already signed up.
Thank you, Brandon and Gates.
Welcome, Brandon. And thank you, Gates. If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @BiopicAPodcastStory. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com. Our theme music is by Ben Patch. The intro is his song Slater Cannonball, and the outro is Spring Breakers, and you can check him out on Spotify.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about Mad Love. That's not the 1995 Mad Love starring Drew Barrymore and Chris O'Donnell. That's a 2001 Spanish movie, also called Mad Love, about Juana of Castile, known to history as Juana la Loca, daughter of that Ferdinand and Isabella, the ones who sent Columbus off.
Great job, guys.
Yeah. This is a Rena episode. I get to look at dresses with enormous princess skirts and talk about a favorite subject of mine, those crazy inbred Habsburgs. I will get to use the term uncle fucker at least once because uncle fucker is the most truthful description of at least a few members of the Habsburg family. So apologies in advance, Sarah.
Thanks.
You are probably going to be bored out of your mind and sit there listlessly wondering, how could you do this to me, Rena?
I will probably I'll probably get like 5 or 6 notes in the notes section, but I'll set you loose on this one.
And good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night. Good night, Rena.
Good night, Sarah.